The only thing that can truly go wrong in our lives on an individual basis is our own personal attitude. It's the way we behave that ultimately determines a lot of what we experience throughout this lifetime, whether good or bad. I mean, people can treat us badly, that's true, but our own attitude is in our own control. Nobody else controls how we behave. Yet, more often than not, we don't really exercise the responsibility concerning our own behavior and how we act, what our attitude is throughout this life. It's a fascinating thing. Have you ever had moments in your life where you realized afterwards, I didn't behave quite as right. I didn't behave to the best of my ability. I didn't actually behave appropriate at all. You know, I think we all have had these experiences, and not everybody wants to admit that. At times it can be hard for people to admit that they screwed up. However, it's in admitting that yes, on reflection we look back at certain times in our lives and realize we could have done better, that the question becomes, will we do better from now on? Or at least in similar situations, will we at least try and make the effort of making better decisions concerning the situation that we might be facing? Or are we going to act according to our old habitual way of living and still make the same mistakes over and over again? You see, this is what it's all about. Life, ultimately, the quality of our lives, is determined by our own personal attitude. And what's the best way of letting your attitude be led? What is the best power that should guide your attitude? Well, that is your imagination. I think taking responsibility for the quality of our lives is one of the hardest things we'll ever face. Because if we really think about it, this is nothing to be ashamed about, but we are in a tendency of always blaming other people and other situations for the quality of our lives. Now, there might be stuff happening in your world that of course affects you, perhaps on a very intense, level. Like if you lose your job and you're out of work and you don't have an income, it's a pretty extreme, effect on your overall well-being. An effect that might have been out of your control altogether if your boss decided that for whatever reason, or the company went bankrupt or whatever. Now, these are just a simple examples, but what I'm getting at is taking responsibility for the quality of our lives. What does it actually mean? Well, it means stopping to point fingers at others, stopping to blame others for our shortcomings. Letting go of past traumas. It's one of the hardest things. I think we all are being driven in a way by traumas, by stuff that happened to us personally in our pasts that might still be controlling us to a certain degree. In some cases it might be worse than others, but there's a lot of times there's stuff that is still holding us back, where we're still in the habit of blaming, either consciously or subconsciously, stuff from our past, or comparing current events to past events, and therefore we can't see the beauty of what's right in front of us. Isn't that bizarre? But again, if we take total responsibility for our own personal attitude, it's something we can at least work on. It's something we can dedicate our times to, because it can ultimately really improve the enjoyment you get out of life if we're willing to take that responsibility for ourselves concerning the state of our lives, the quality of our lives, where instead of giving into negativity or limiting circumstances, we learn to exercise our minds and think and imagine beyond the obstacles we're facing, so we can create something better for ourselves and everybody else. Or at least ultimately, if you create a better life for yourself, it puts you in a position to share that improvement with others if you want to. And that's kind of beautiful if you think about it. But again, if we sit back, if we let life happen to us, instead of us exercising the power of our minds to control our own attitude and how we behave, so we can determine the results that we'll get, well, then we'll miss out on a lot of beauty that is to be found throughout this physical life experience. At times I don't really like it personally, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, there's times for me where I don't feel as excited or motivated to do stuff. Yet at the same time, you know, the ups and downs are part of life. But getting back to the place where you're like, I'm going to take responsibility for the quality of my life. I'm going to make something out of this, no matter what happened in the past, no matter what I did supposedly wrong, no matter what somebody else did to me, it doesn't matter. I am going to stick to my own purpose in life, to the best of my ability. Now, we all screw up at times, but this is where it can be pretty beneficial to remember that ultimately the only thing that can go wrong in life is my own personal attitude, your own attitude, everybody's attitude. If we think about it, I don't think people necessarily want to act on evil ideas, yet it happens more often than not. It's kind of like some people might portray that they seem to literally desire doing negative things, but somewhere behind that negativity is always this compulsion, this true desire of wanting to be happy, of wanting to be fulfilled. So we're doing everything in the hopes that it will make us happy. We're doing it under the assumption that it will improve our lives, or at least bring us something that we want. As I once wrote for a song, love and hate are two sides of the same coin, expressed in different ways. But if you think about it, that's really true. Because in both cases, there's a certain obsession with what's going on in our lives, with a person or with a thing, with an event. You can love or hate it. We can love and hate things, but ultimately our personal attitude should be directed by our imagination, so we can work with the most loving concepts that we can build within our own consciousness. And then we gotta have to try as to the best of our abilities to express that positivity that we can see within our imagination. Because by at least trying, by at least putting in the effort to let your attitude sink in with these glorious, magnificent visions within your own consciousness, well, that's when you start to raise yourself to a higher level. But likewise, you also start raising up the whole world. It sounds bizarre, I know. But as I said before, if you improve your life, it ultimately puts you in a position to share that improvement with others. So yes, in a way, you are helping to lift up the entire world. If we ourselves, on an individual basis, start to work on our own personal attitude and make that as positive as we can. And this is not easy, because many of us are trained to live in reactionary mode to everything, instead of directing the whole thing from within. It's even hard for me at times. There's always times where you feel like you want to lash out. You want to perhaps do something negative towards somebody else for whatever reason. You see, this is something that happens to us all. Maybe it differs in the degree and intensity that we experience such a phenomena, but we all have to overcome that tendency of reacting. But at least making the effort is better than never making the effort, and many people, they don't even want to make the effort. They live in a reactionary mode from the cradle to the grave, never understanding that the quality of life, and that the only thing that can go wrong in their lives is their own personal attitude. Because even if something bad happens to you, it's your own personal attitude that will determine if you come out a better person or not. Remember this. And with that being said, dear viewer, never forget that we are the dreamers.